And now, on our main topic here at Mastering Dungeons, we are going to get into part 2 of chapter 9 of the 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide. This here is the good stuff. We are talking about the Dungeon Master's Workshop, adventuring options, combat options, creating a monster, casting spells, and all of that good stuff. We will definitely not get through this whole part, the rest of the chapter in part 2, but we are going to dig deep and talk about some of these beautiful, beautiful options. We got partway through adventure options last time, so let's dig right back in, talking about firearms, explosives, and alien technology. Because who doesn't love some firearms, explosives, and alien technology? Well, apparently
Bill
enough
Slavicsek.
people so it doesn't go into the book. Yeah, exactly. uh, because it's an option, it's not in the main rules. So that's who.
Mm-hmm.
Teos, get us started here with this
Yeah,
section.
we get rules for sort of a breakdown of three categories: Renaissance, modern weapons, and alien ones. And they do a really nice job of giving you very straightforward rules that cover kind of a little, they give you a little taste of possible complexity, but it's not like, you open a book of Spycraft or D20 Modern even, or, where there are just so many options. This is just a very simple, like, hey, look, there's a rifle, there's a pistol. That's it. And there are things like, burst fire, spend 10 ammo, creatures in a 10-foot cube, make a dex save or take the damage. We get costs, which is a little silly. So like Renaissance, okay, a bullet costs 3 gold, but then in modern and beyond, the weapons are just and the ammo are priceless. The idea is just, you can't find this, you can't buy it. There's no price to it. There's no concept of it. It's that rare. Damage, a musket is 1d10 piercing, modern is 2d8 or 2d10, laser rifle is 3d8, and then the antimatter rifle, 6d8 necrotic. Yeah, kind of cool. What'd you think about this, Shawn?
I just wish they had taken the next step of saying, if you do introduce these things to the game, you might want to be aware of blank. So I looked at it from the game design point of view of what is this going to do if I introduce this to my game? So I start with the firearms of the Renaissance. And I'm like, pistol and musket. Okay. Costly. You're going to have to pay 250 or 500 gold to get a pistol or a musket. All right. What's the damage? 1 to 10 piercing. That's like any other weapon. That's fine. Musket, 1d12 piercing. No problem there. Weight, yes. Ammunition, good. All right. Normal ranges and loading. Okay. So I can't do anything very special. It'd be like loading a crossbow. I need to
Mm-hmm.
stop. I can't shoot 7 times in a round. I have to stop and
Yeah.
load the weapon. Excellent. So then I go to the next one, which is the modern items, modern pistols, revolvers, hunting rifles, and stuff. And instead of loading, they have this reload uh, tag attribute. And it's you can make a number of shots before you need to reload it, but then you must reload it using an action or a bonus action. And my first thought was, no, don't use bonus actions. Bonus actions, we've been told over and over again, are these special things that only
Right.
classes, you know, have abilities. That's where bonus actions belong, in the class section. So don't put it on a piece of equipment. Second thing is, all right, so now if I'm a fighter, I don't have a loading ability. So if I get 3 attacks in a round, I can shoot this pistol 3 times by rules, unless I'm reading something wrong. I'm like, okay, so what sort of damage are we looking at with an automatic rifle? All right, 2d8 piercing. That's quite powerful at 3 times a round. Um, all right, I'm cool with that, but just give me the new DM. Hey, if you give people a shotgun, they're going to be able to shoot, or a rifle, automatic rifle. They're going to be able to shoot it several times in a round. So be wary of what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get into, right, the futuristic stuff
Yeah.
where you're talking about the antimatter rifle or the laser rifle, where you're shooting 3d8 damage, and you can shoot 30 times before you have to reload.
We and we do get a
What
table
if you're
that is
hasted, right?
yeah. We do get a table of figuring out alien technology, and we're told that you should have to do some troubleshooting to even understand how it operates and what it is. But if you ever took a look at the classic Barrier Peaks adventure, it had a nightmare of a table that was a diagram that looks like a conspiracy theory chart with all these different roles that you end up traveling along as you make these decisions. And most of the time, the thing would just explode in your face, or you're shooting it the wrong way. In fact, one of the drawings, I loved it because you couldn't really figure out which way to point it. And it was the opposite of what you might think. Like there's like a power crystal that's actually like gathering the energy, but it shoots out the other end. And then, so it was very funny. You could have fun with it. But in these rules, you don't blow it up, or you might expend a charge is the worst, but you don't cause the thing to malfunction. So it would have been nice to have some advice here on, hey, if you introduce this stuff, you've got to introduce very little of it, because you can't have this haunting your campaign until the end of time. You can't give them limitless ammo. You've got to have some real strict limits, so that it doesn't become too much. Like, yeah, give your fighter the heyday of that time they fired the anti-rifle, all combat long, but then it was out of ammo. And life resumed to being normal.
Yep. Precisely. And it only takes 2 sentences to say that in a way that would be super helpful to DMs.
Yeah.
But yeah, everything else there, I'm like, okay, cool. This gives me a blueprint for if I want to do something a little different with these rules, I can model based on this. So I'm cool with that. And the next thing, or the last thing under adventure options, are plot points. And what do plot points do? Plot points allow players to change the course of the campaign, introduce plot complications, alter the world, and even assume the role of DM. And then the next sentence: if your first reaction to reading this optional rule is to worry that your players might abuse it, it's probably not for you. And I read that, I'm like, yeah. That's the perfect bit of advice, said so succinctly yet so perfectly. This is a very fun way to play for certain game masters and certain players. For others, it is the opposite of what you might consider fun.
Yeah.
So what do they mean by plot points, Teos?
So what they mean is really quite fascinating. I'm still kind of stunned that this isn't in this book. You get a plot point, and you can spend 1 per session, and you regain it after spending it. So you might have it, but can't use it because you already used it once this session. And then we're given 3 options of what you can do with a plot point. Option 1, you can add some element to the setting or situation. The examples given are, you find a secret door, or you decide an NPC appears, or you decide that a monster turns out to be a long-lost ally who was polymorphed. I'm like, whoa, those are powerful options, right? It isn't like they might give me a clue or something. It's like, I'm changing reality into what I want it to be. Option 2 is like option 1, but furthermore, the player to their right must add a complication. So yeah, player 1 chose to add a secret door, but the other person chooses to put a trap on it that teleports everywhere someone else in the dungeon. And that's the example given. I'm like, oh, that would be contentious. Like, I wanted a secret door to go to this place, and you sent me over there. Like, that's grounds for argument. Option 3, spend a plot point to become the DM. Your PC is an NPC until you change again. And the whole idea here is that DMs can players can spend plot points to just move the game into completely different directions over time. And wow, I was really impressed by this. Shawn, what do you think?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, there would be players who I would pay money right now to play this way with. Right. I would.
In a good way.
It would be the most fun I would probably have. Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Then there are players who I would pay money not to be in the same time zone as them if this were the way that things were going to play. And it all depends on the kind of player that you have, the kind of game master you are, and the kind of stories and game experiences that you want. But just the fact that it's there, and the fact that it lets people know that this is an acceptable way to play D&D is a very powerful statement.
Yeah. So, I as I was reading this, I thought to myself, gee, I'm wondering, like, all these optional rules in here, is this a vestige of the original idea that D&D Next had, where it started saying, like, they're going to be optional modules that could allow you to use different styles? Is that why we end up with all these optional rules, where they're sort of like, cutting room ideas that they had considered adding to 5e, the design team had, but then kind of were like, what, let's just put this in this back of this book? Or was it, something else? And so I reached out to one of the team members that designed 5th edition and was part of the major team with the D&D Next design. And they said, if I remember correctly, it was a bit of all three. The core system tested well, but we suspected that it wouldn't be a perfect fit for everyone. The system was built for flexibility, so we figured we would show it off a bit in the DMG. I think the options were all designed after the final 5e system set it into place. They're likely a mix of options that basically Rodney, Peter, Mike, Rob were all personally interested in. So I said, for example, the replacing the flat proficiency bonus or the die was a rule that some of us liked, but didn't test that well. So for the minority that liked it, we wanted to keep that option in to let them use it. And I thought that was a really fascinating answer. And nice to see that historical perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this, what we just read shows that there is a wide variety of play styles that are supported by this, and you could do worse than to try it out with players and game masters that you love. I would love to say, okay, I'm going to be the DM at first, but I'm going to have a player character as well. And when somebody is ready to do something really cool with the story that's ongoing, use your plot point, step in, and off we go.
Yeah, that's wild.
So those were the adventuring options. Now we have combat options. What are these combat options? They are alternative ways to handle combat. And the main risk, we are told, of adding some of these rules is slowing down play. So thank you for taking that next step and saying, even if it's a very general statement, that this could slow down play. We'll talk first about the initiative variants that they provide. The first is just an initiative score. You don't roll initiative with this option. You take 10 and you add your dexterity modifier, and that's your initiative score, which you use every time.
I know
cuts down on die rolling.
Just say, I know a DM who uses this option at conventions, which is cool because he does it not just with his group. He will have them sit in this order. And so then you always know, like, just play goes clockwise. And I find it very fascinating. I don't like it in principle, but tables, I've actually never played with this system, but he has had a lot of folks say, that was kind of nice. Wouldn't necessarily do it all the time, but like, it really does speed up play a ton, and everybody always knows who's going. It's always in that same order. There's some advantages to that.
Yeah. If I was running a learn to play game, I would absolutely do that, because if I have 45 minutes to run a game, the last thing I need is rolling dice. Who knows how good folks are at math, working all of that out. So that's one option here in the book. Second option is side initiative. Record initiative for each PC and monster, and then arrange everyone in the correct order, remembering where you are in the because remembering where you are in the list can bog the game down. So under this variant, players roll a d20. You roll a d20 as the game master. Neither side has any modifiers, and whoever rolls the highest wins. If you win as the game master, you go first. Then the players go. if the players win, vice versa. They choose, their side goes first, they decide what order, and then it switches back over to your side. Thoughts
Yeah.
about that?
I like it a lot as a way to deal with things when PCs are grouped up or sides are grouped up for some reason. So, like ship combat, it's excellent because you want to sort of represent that whole vessel and not deal with the what am I doing when related to, or I want to do this when I'm 50 feet away. So, you just handle the whole ship moving and doing things, and then the other ship moves and does things. And so, that can be a nice reason to use side initiative. This is the way I used to always do things, back in AD&D. Every side rolls a die, and we didn't do more than that. Like we did not do choose your actions or call or anything. We would just, side went. So perfectly fine, works fine.
And we're told this variant encourages teamwork and makes your life as a DM easier because then you can coordinate monster tactics as well. On the downside, the side that wins initiative can gang up on enemies and take them out before they have a chance to act, which is very true. And again, 2 short sentences tell you exactly what's good and what's problematic about using this all the time. And the last initiative variant we're given is speed factor. So some DMs think that doing initiative the way it's set in the rules is too predictable. And always know you're running you first, you second, you third, you first, you second, you third, again and again and again. And then players can use that knowledge to influence their decisions. So speed factor is an option that introduces more uncertainty into the combat at the cost of speed of play. So under this variant, the participants roll initiative each round, and each round the character and monster chooses an action which then modifies their initiative score. So things are going to change from round to round. Things are going to be much more unpredictable, and things will change based on, if you want to do something quick, you better choose an action that has a shorter initiative modifier time as opposed to something that has a long one. What do you think about that?
I hate it. I always hated speed factor. The idea that like there are things like if you're tiny, you're faster. Yeah, except when you're not. If I'm huge, I'm slower. Yeah, except when you're not. Like it's too much. I'm wielding this kind of weapon or I'm casting a spell. I find it dissatisfying. I like other options better. So like there's a clock for initiative in Arcanus that, when you will go next is a number of cubes based on what kind of action you took. I think that is a better way to handle it with more feedback and more balance to these various options, and the game is built for it. Or there's some other games that will do options around this kind of idea, and I think it's, again, focusing the game on this and building for it. I don't like this as a tacked on system for 5e. What do you think?
I agree. This is one of those rules, and there are several in here where it sounds good when you're coming up with it, and then when you actually play with it, you realize how clunky it is, how complex it is, how prone to abuse it can become, and you usually end up going to something simpler and more standard.
Yeah.
And I think this would probably fall into that category as well.
It's also really hard to announce your action at the start of your turn and then get locked into it, and the idea that you just forgo your action if you don't take it, right? I'm going to cast Fireball. By the time it gets to my turn, there's only 2 creatures that I can get. Now I don't want to. So my choice is either a really disappointing Fireball or not doing anything. That's a dissatisfying play too often, I find, and hurts some characters more than others, right? Because the Barbarian is just going to go up and attack things every single round, almost. The Wizard deals with this kind of down time, or down moment a lot more.
And it started making me think of ways that you could do it where you have 2 phases to a combat. First, everyone does their actions, and then everyone takes their moves after everyone has done their actions. Then the question becomes, do you want to be the first person to move or the last? because if you're the first person to move, you have to do it, and then everyone else can react to what you have done.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting thing that I've toyed with in the past of doing, and wondering how it changes gameplay.
Yeah.
It doesn't work great with D&D always, but for other game systems it might. So
Yeah.
it's a
Shadow the
it's a
Demon
fun thing
Lord.
to think about as a game designer.
Shadow the Demon Lord, right? With its fast and slow turn. Like you get to decide, do you want to move and attack? Or do you want to just do a quick attack? Do you want to just move? Then you can go faster and get in there by sacrificing how much you can do. And that forces
Mhm.
roughly half the players to take a very fast turn. So combat is very fast because you're doing that, right? This is almost the opposite, as they note, right? You're going to overthink it. Then you're going to finally choose. Then you might be disappointed or surprised. Yeah.
Then we get into action options. This section provides new action options for combat. They can be added as a group or individually to your game. So, what are some of these actions that people that are not good enough to be, or not prevalent enough to be in the main rules, but put here in the Dungeon Master's Guide? It's an interesting list. First is climb onto a bigger creature. And as soon as I read that, I'm like, yep, new players, I always get somebody, who's like, I want to climb up on top of the blank. And as a game master who wants to encourage storytelling, you just sort of make it up on the fly. Well, this gives you actual rules for it. What do we think of those actual rules, Mr. Abadia?
I don't like them. It just,
Mhm.
yeah, I don't like any of these really. All of these options, climbing onto a bigger creature, disarming, marking, overrunning, shove aside, tumble, I either feel like the game already covers them well enough or you want it to be circumstantial. Um, this is the kind of thing where I think you're taking away from what you want the game to be, right? Like marking, either you want to bake it into your system. Like fourth edition had the idea that when you were a defender class, you could mark an opponent and it meant a number of things, and your powers triggered off of it, your attacks, your feats, all of it. You could do special things. And so it was system wide, right? And enemies did it to you too. The idea that just you're going to say, hey, I'm marking them, I get advantage on opportunity attacks. I'd rather that be the if we're going to have that light a rule, instead make it a conversation and just, I want to try to keep this guy pinned down here. Great. Here's a way you could do that in this situation. And let's just make it situational calls and encourage that kind of discussion between players rather than trying to pin down with what I find to be sort of lackluster rules.
Mhm.
If I dare say
Okay.
so. What do you think?
Yeah. No, I'm in the same boat. As like I said, when I first read this list, I was like, okay, this is something that I've had, except for Mark.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone, like new players especially, say, can I do this? Or I do this. And then I'm like, well, there's no rule for that. So as an improv game master, I find a way for them to do that. It's
Right.
often at a risk or a consequence, but they do it.
Yeah.
Uh, but I can see some DMs say, no, you cannot climb onto a bigger creature or disarm someone or shove someone aside or run past someone or tumble past someone because it's not in the rules. So these sort of give a framework for those things, which I think is okay.
It's
The
fine, but I
bigger
guess the
question
question,
is,
Shawn, is usually these things, there's a reason, right? Like disarming is one of the stupidest things you can do in the edition. And let's, by stupidest, I mean the least pleasing. Like, I disarm you. Cool. On my turn, I pick up the thing again as a free action, you know, so nothing happened. When I want to disarm, what I want to tell the DM is, look, I'm looking to make sure they can't get this thing. What can I do to do that? And this rule doesn't actually help me with that, right? Some of them kind of do like shove aside, yeah, I want to shove them to this side. But again, I just feel like that can be part of the conversation. And I'd rather all of this space, essentially a half, actually, it's all, yeah, a page and about a page and a half, so no, half a page. A little over that. I'd rather it be used for how to adjudicate interesting things like this rather than giving us specific engagement methods.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I agree in the sense that disarming, especially, it looks cool in the movies, right? And so those players who come to the game from that media uh want to try that without realizing exactly what you said, that mechanically it's not pleasing. Not only is it not mechanically uh pleasing, it can be overpowered in
Oh, yeah.
certain situations, uh right, where the creature wielding the double two-handed huge magical flaming sword, as soon as you take that away from the creature, it becomes almost impotent, right? It's doing
Yeah.
1+ strength damage now,
My favorite
and that's no fun
example
either.
My favorite example of this, Shawn, is in third edition. There was an adventure where you were in a cloud castle, and there was a well that just literally dropped thousands of feet below, and there was a enemy that had dual wielding whips and would disarm two things, and the list included your
Mhm.
holy symbol. And back then in third edition, you
Mhm.
could choose the square, so it would drop the things into the pit. So if you were a cleric, you could now
Mhm.
basically not cast most spells.
Mhm.
And what this led to was a
Right.
rash of players writing on their character sheet that their holy symbol was, secured to their armor, right? Welded
Mhm.
on from then on out because it was
Yeah.
such a, it could be
Right.
so powerful. That's the problem when you play by rules, right? Versus play by intent
Right.
and make calls. It can be abused like that, used against everybody.
Yep. Yeah. If there is a win button, players will, and sometimes game masters will just try to keep punching the win button. And so that's why disarm, right? I understand why it's there, because there are certain times in stories where you are trying to save the item from something. And so you need to be able to get it away from someone. Uh, but as you say, you can just make an opposed strength check or something to do that. You don't need too many rules if you can just make it a story
Mhm.
based ruling, if you will.
Yeah.
And this, the overrun and shove aside and tumble, for me, are sort of important because of the rule that you can't pass through another creature.
Mhm.
uh Sometimes it's important that you get past something that's blocking your way. And by the rules as written, you can't. And so then you get, people, well, can I climb the wall, run up, right? They try to do these different things because it's so
Yeah.
important to the story. But so I understand why these things are there. Uh, I would have loved to have push as a rule
Mhm.
in the base game. So just have that shove aside be
Yeah.
a tangential rule to it. If you need to move someone 5 feet in a different direction, other than straight away from you.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we have alternate rules for hitting cover. This goes
Mhm.
back to sort of, third edition and before, where there's a chance you hit the cover. And so the main reason this matters is if it's a creature providing cover, well, you might hit the creature. Um, yeah, sure. Cleaving through creatures, when you kill a creature and you have extra damage left, you can use the same attack roll on the adjacent creature or a creature within reach and add any leftover damage to that creature. Yeah, fine. And then we
No,
have
no, it's
no,
it's not.
no, fine. Why?
Oh, this is this is one of those rules that sounds like, okay, cool, yeah, it's fun. I hate it when there's a 1 hit point monster and I do 27 points to it, and oh, that should have. Think of if Just stop if you are an experienced game master or player and think about the 10,000 things that you might have to do in a situation exactly like this. All right, there's two creatures standing next to each other. One has a 13 to hit this one, a 17 to hit this one. Okay, I hit him. I get rolled a 13. I hit this monster. He only had 2 hit points. I did 20. All right, so I want to do 18 to this one. Well, you only rolled a 13, so that can't hit the AC 17 monster. Well, I have Bardic Inspiration. Can I use that? Well, no.
No.
Okay, same thing. This monster, you're attacking with a flaming sword. You do slashing and fire damage. Well, how much damage to the original creature was fire?
Oh, yeah.
How much of it was slashing? Because this one's vulnerable over here. So, and that's just like 2 that I can come up with off the top of my head. What if you have advantage on one, but not right? You attack this one with advantage, but you don't have a advantage for this creature. You rolled 2. Is which? Well, you don't have advantage on that one. Why should, or disadvantage, or right? All of those things are going to come up and just turn into a mess.
Well, and that's true of all of these things, honestly. These all are like house rules that went through some thinking, but not all the thinking that they would if they were core. And unfortunately, what I don't think is said well enough in this section is there are going to be unintended consequences of all these, right? I mean, the next section, lingering injuries. Rules to have lingering injuries when you take a critical hit are reduced to 0 but not killed, or fail a death save by 5 or more. And it's things like, you'll lose an eye or a limb, and here are the magical ways you can remove it. And in one situation, it might be such a problem, like you can't wield your 2-handed weapon that you use. But in another, well, you just have the spell to fix it, and then it goes away instantly, and nobody cares. Another option they give here is to the player can decide on the actual injury and create a flaw for it. And I think, again, this is all fine if you want to think through all of the ways this is going to impact your game and deal with those, and your group is going to be okay with that, because it's going to have a big impact if you do these things. Massive damage, which used to be a big problem in 3rd edition. When damage from a single source deals half your hit points or more, roll on a table, and you might be reduced to 0 hit points or stunned. At least it doesn't kill you outright like in 3rd edition, but it's still, number of things that could happen because you took such a big blow.
Yep. And last but not least, we get to morale under combat options, which is, you're whacking away at a monster or a group of monsters. You want them to flee or you want them to surrender. How do you handle that? And again, this is good, right? This is something that comes up a lot.
Sure.
It's okay if there's a rule for it. Many game masters have figured out ways to handle it in terms of the story so that there's not a random roll that can change something really before it fits with the story. You want the story to come out the right way. Not, well, I just happened to roll a 1 on my wisdom save, so the Lich has surrendered, even though it really doesn't need to yet. So it's good to have a rule there for reference, but you also need to, it has to pass the common sense test.
Yeah, and morale is a touchy thing. I mean, I think DMs, especially who grew up with it, really appreciate it. I know Merrick Blackman has had a blog or a good blog article exploring the subject. But I think for a lot of folks, it's a dissatisfying thing, and I wrote about this a fair bit in the Forge of Foes book that we did with Mike Shea and then Scott Fitzgerald Gray, about the idea of 2 things. One is that morale checks often don't reflect the story or the intent or the understanding players have. And so I would like advice on establishing that up front, right? If this is a combat where the monsters are interested in fleeing or interested in negotiations or things like that, you want to communicate that. And
Mhm.
if you're going to have them run away, understand that running away is really hard in 5th edition. So think about what you're going to do. Are you going to handle a chase scene like we talked about before?
Mhm.
Are you going to, hand wave it? Are you going to have some way that they can get away? Are they going to do something to distract the PCs? Because just going into a chase, like a normal, like run down the corridors kind of thing, is going to be really long and boring and terrible. And you'll wish you just sat there and let them all die most of the time. So,
True
I
story.
just morale rules I think need to come with more these days to be satisfying to most of today's DMs. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. So we have gotten through another little section of this. We have more to go, but we will not be covering that today. We will handle that when we are all fresh and refreshed next time. But let us thank everyone for your support. If you're a listener, thank you so much for listening. We do appreciate you hanging in there and abiding our madness. If you are a Patreon supporter, thank you to our Master of Dungeon supporters. We couldn't do this without you. Thank you, Master of Realm supporters. You have a special mention in our show notes. And to the Masters of the Multiverse, well, this one's for you. Graham Ward, James Walton, Joe Tyler, Krishna Simose, Andy Shockney, Ross Sandberg, Chance Russo at Drago Russo, Vladimir Prenner from Croatia, Post Fiction RPG Audio, Falcon Neal, Shawn Molly, The Micro Ant, Eric Mengi, The Mathemagician, Chad Lynch, Jim Klingler, aka DM Prime Mover, Brian King, sorry about the Lions this week, that was tough, Chad Johnson, Sean Hurst, Paige Lightman and Ben Heisler, The Mighty Jerd, Nathan Fuller, Andy Edmonds at Nerdronomicon, Seth Eckel, Darren Chandler, DM Chad, Evil John, Merrick Blackman, Steve Bissonette, Craig Bailey, and Keith Ammon of The Monsters Know What They're Doing. Thank you for your support. You, yes, you, valued listener, can become a patron and join our Discord and help us out by going to patreon.com/masteringdnd. Every little bit helps pay our fees and our hosting and all of that, and we very much appreciate all the support. If you do get a chance, you can also leave us a review on Apple Podcast or by whatever means you listen to this podcast. That helps us get some 5-star ratings and get some good traction out there. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. If our voices aren't enough and you need to see us, I'm sorry, but you can make that choice if you so choose. Yes, let's make beautiful faces. Teos, where can people find you?
Find me at alphastream.org, where you can download my face. No, well, I mean, I guess technically, but don't do that. You can, from there, find all the other places where I am. But I want to know where I find myself as Shawn Merwin.
I can find myself on Twitter or X or whatever. The podcast is also there at Mastering D&D. We're on Mastodon. I'm at Tabletop Social, but the show is at Dice Camp. And you can join our community. You can go on Blue Sky now at Mastering D&D. And you can also leave comments on our YouTube channel where some people have done just that. So, Teos, we've gotten through some adventuring options. We've gotten through some optional combat rules. We're still standing. Our morale is holding strong. What are we going to do now?
I'm going to go use the optional rules for resting so I can slather that in more antibacterial ointment and recuperate fully for some other amount of fun home ownership that will be challenging me in the future.
Luckily, you did not have to roll on the massive damage table because we would not have wanted that.